The early 2000s were something of a golden age for reality TV. Shows like Survivor and American Idol were pulling in huge ratings with mainstream audiences. And we also saw the rise of prank shows like Jackass, dating shows like The Bachelor, hard job shows like Deadliest Catch, makeover shows like Pimp My Ride, and shows where we just sort of followed famous people and not so famous people around in their homes to see what their lives were like. Whatever your brand of voyeurism was, you could probably find a show that catered to it. Many of the most popular shows had a competition element to them. Audiences loved rooting for their favorite contestants as player after player got eliminated, and sometimes the audiences even got to sway the results by texting or tweeting to vote for their faves. Contestants would form alliances and play psychological games with each other, trying to prevent their friends or teammates from being eliminated. For some of these shows, the eliminations were as simple as not having chemistry with the guy who's looking for a wife on national television. But for other shows, the eliminations came after grueling physical challenges, painful ordeals, and even borderline humiliation rituals. And people really liked watching this stuff. So as you can imagine, a lot of reality shows popped up that tried to capitalize on this combination of ostensibly ordinary people, competition, eliminations, and torture for the audience's amusement. There were a lot of shows like this, and some of them came and went so fast most people don't even remember them. There was The Chamber, which ran on Fox, where contestants had to answer questions while they were trapped in a chamber that got intensely hot or cold and also beat them up with wind and earthquakes. This was canceled after 3 episodes due to lack of interest and, ethical concerns. There was The Chair, which strapped people into a chair and monitored their heart rates while they answered questions, and if their pulse got too fast, they were punished. There was Man vs. Beast, which pitted humans against animals, like a man having a tug-of-war with an orangutan. I had no idea this was a thing, and I kinda wish I'd seen it when it was on, but of course it was short-lived and widely panned by critics, animal rights activists, and anyone with a functioning brain. And of course there was Fear Factor, the gold standard of this genre of show, which tortured contestants with their phobias, but also just pummeled them with really gross and scary stuff like making them eat pig rectums and pretending to drown them in tanks.
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained?
This show ran for 7 seasons. Even shows like The Biggest Loser were pretty much just a way to watch people suffer under the thin premise of bettering themselves. Viewers tuned in to watch overweight contestants be yelled at by trainers for weeks until someone finally lost enough weight to get money. The whole thing was incredibly unhealthy on a whole bunch of levels. I recommend the Netflix documentary Fit for TV if you want to see just how bad it got behind the scenes. Because yeah, it got bad. And as with a lot of shows, a whole lot of awful stuff happened both on and off camera to make something that was entertaining for the masses. All these shows prove 2 things. Audiences love to watch people suffer, and contestants will put up with just about anything for the chance to win money. And networks churned out this content as fast as they could to capitalize on the trends. For a while, you saw content like this on so many TV channels, even ones that you might not have expected to sink to that level. The Sci-Fi Channel, for example, which was owned by Comcast until recently, and which had launched in the 90s with the respectability of Gene Roddenberry and Isaac Asimov behind it. They still eventually put out their own reality slop. One example of this was Opposite Worlds, a show that was so bad that Jenny Nicholson did a video about it, which I highly suggest you check out. The link is in the description. So much went wrong with that production, but even the shows that didn't actively injure their participants tended to be gimmicky, silly, and forgettable. For the record, I was never a reality show buff. I don't really enjoy manufactured drama. I don't like seeing people in pain. And other than like 1 season of Survivor and 1 season of American Idol, I mostly avoided reality competitions. Mostly. Okay, quick pause. While I was editing this, I realized that there actually are some shows that I like that would probably qualify as reality competition shows. One example would be RuPaul's Drag Race. I really like that show. I've also enjoyed some cooking competition shows in the past. I guess what separates those from the kind of shows I'm talking about here is that those shows include contestants who are like professionals in their field and they're competing in a very niche talent type of thing where they're applying their skills rather than just like scrambling around for money or trying to look hot for a bachelor, like that kind of thing. I realize the distinction is pretty thin, but when I think of these sort of reality shows that I'm here to analyze or lampoon, I think more about the ones where the contestants are ostensibly regular people and not people with a special skill set that they are competing within. I hope that makes sense. Yeah, anyway, it's my video, I can do what I want. On with the video. Which brings me to the subject of this video, a show that tried to combine the phobias of Fear Factor with the psychological games of Survivor, with the added element of a dark and spooky goth aesthetic, which is important to note because this show aired at the same time the first Twilight movie came out, so vampire-coded stuff was all the rage. The year was 2008, the channel was Sci-Fi, because of course it was, and for the one season it aired, this show had me in a chokehold in a way no other reality show had before or since. It was called A State of Panic, and to this day, most people I ask have never heard of it. So let me take you on a little journey right now to explore this short-lived reality show of greed, fear, and a host who absolutely nailed the brief. It was just 6 episodes, but it lives rent-free in my head to this day. Come into the estate with me, and we'll see just who gets out alive. A State of Panic was a reality competition show that ran from November 12th to December 17th, 2008 on the Sci-Fi Channel. It aired after the popular show Ghost Hunters, and it was produced by Edna Mode USA, the same production company behind Fear Factor. Which makes sense, Fear Factor aired on NBC, and NBC Universal acquired the Sci-Fi Channel a few years before A State of Panic was made, so it's all in the family, production-wise. A State of Panic was hosted by Scottish actor Steve Valentine, and it brought 7 contestants together each episode into what appeared to be a large and somewhat creepy mansion. There was also a butler, Rupert, but he never spoke. Each episode ran for 44 minutes, so with commercials it filled a 1-hour time slot. I should mention that A State of Panic wasn't Sci-Fi's first foray into this sort of show. In 2003, they aired a program called Scare Tactics, which was a hidden camera show where victims were put into scary situations because their family members and the producers set them up. Like Punk'd, but with the style and vibe of a horror movie, with actors messing with them and stuff like that.
I want to set up my friend Tayana because she's been kind of stressed out and a little high-strung lately, and it'll be good for her to get a good scream. This should be good.
It ran for a total of 5 seasons and was moderately successful, which I'm sure helped to fuel the network's interest in making more scary reality content. One of the victims of Scare Tactics did sue the show for emotional damages and repeated hospitalizations, and she won, but I guess that wasn't a deterrent for making more content like this. Anyway, A State of Panic came along a few years later, as well as a game-themed reality competition show that launched at the same time called The Chase, with the S being a $sign. Very clever, but I didn't watch that one. So, quick overview of the structure and mechanics for the A State of Panic episodes. The episodes each unfold the same way. The host welcomes the contestants in a dry, condescending way. He says the mansion is his house, and he challenges the group to go find the money he's hidden in the different rooms, or in some cases outside. The 7 contestants go into a room together and start looking for money, and while they do that, the room punishes them by putting them through scary situations. In each room, the contestants grab as much money as they can and then get out of the room. They have to be careful not to be the last person out of the room, because the last person out is eliminated. The show makes it look like that person is just stuck in the room and left to die, but of course they leave off camera. The contestants who make it out of the room have their money counted, and the one with the least money is also eliminated. So for each room, there are 2 eliminations, one for the last person to leave, and one for whoever gets the least money. This makes the show move pretty quickly, and it also means that for 7 contestants, they just need 3 torture rooms to whittle it down to 1 person. That one person, the last contestant standing, gets the chance to go for even more money in the house's vault. But of course there are obstacles there too, like the person may be chained to the floor or tied to the ceiling while a ticking clock threatens to lock them in. If they manage to get free and get out of the vault before the time runs out, they win all the money they found in the vault plus all the money that everyone found earlier in the episode. If they don't escape in time, they lose it all. And if they think they're not going to make it in time but they still want to leave with something, they can hit a panic button and be released, but then they only keep half the money. So you can see there's definitely a psychological element to this game, which I think works in its favor. It lets the contestants get into their own heads, wondering if they found enough money in each room to avoid being eliminated, wondering how many people are left in the room that they're searching because they don't want to be the last to leave, wondering if they should hit the panic button in the vault and at least get some money before time runs out. The atmosphere of creepy haunted mansion adds a lot to the vibe, and the obstacles are sometimes genuinely scary. I don't know how much of it was TV and how much was real, but for the room that fills with water, or the rooms full of wires that shock you with electricity, the pain seemed legitimate. I'll delve into more of that in a sec. Anyway, like I said before, there were only 6 episodes of the show aired, and then it went to the trash pile of failed reality competition shows. The mansion they used as a set was real. They filmed at an estate in Argentina, although they also did some of the challenges in a studio because, they didn't want to tear up the actual house with flooding and structural damage. The sets were pretty elaborate, using both the inside and outside of the house, like the gardens and sewers, and the vibe was authentically creepy. The host, Steve Valentine, is an actor I recognized from other things when I first watched this. He's done a lot of projects, his main one probably being a show called Crossing Jordan, and also some notable voice work, but I knew him from an episode of House MD where he played a magician. That episode aired about a year before A State of Panic did. He fit the magician role really well because apparently he actually is a magician, and the same vibe came through in hosting A State of Panic. In my opinion, he was perfectly cast for this, which I'll get to later. I haven't been able to find any information about Rupert the butler, who is described in the show as an 80-year-old maniacal freak. He never speaks, and he doesn't do anything maniacal on camera. The director of the show is called J. Rupert Thompson, but it's not the same guy, unfortunately. That would have been funny. But yeah, only Steve and Rupert are recurring characters. All the other contestants change for every episode. It's probably worth mentioning that, like most reality shows, the contestants on A State of Panic aren't all just regular folks who wandered in from BFE, Idaho. Executive producer Richard Hall said in an interview with the Futon Critic that the show used an LA casting agency that specialized in reality shows to source the contestants. A lot of reality shows do this, but while some shows intentionally go for people who are attractive and fit, this show didn't lean into that as much. They did look for one thing in particular with their personalities, though. Hall said, "We have a lot of very reactive people, very willing to share their inner monologues with the world at any time. And of course, on a show like this, that was extremely entertaining." Yeah, some of these people do say some weird stuff, so that tracks. When I checked, more than a dozen of these State of Panic contestants also have IMDb pages, and many have been working actors before and since the show, mostly as day players. In fact, as I was rewatching the show for this video, I spotted this guy in episode 3 that looked so familiar. And yeah, it turns out he's been in a lot of stuff. He didn't win the State of Panic, but he made it pretty far before getting eliminated, so good for him, I guess. So, did people actually win money on A State of Panic? Yes, but it wasn't like life-changing money. It was the amount of money you'd expect for a cable reality game show. Out of the 6 episodes, 5 of them had the final contestant manage to get out of the vault with between $26,000 and $36,000. Only one episode had the last guy panic in the vault, and pressing the panic button meant he left with around $13,000. Still not bad, but I don't know if it's worth it for what they went through. Speaking of the ordeals of the game, I should point out that even though it's framed like all the obstacles happen in just one night, each episode ends with a disclaimer that in reality, they filmed just one challenge per day. So each episode took 4 days to shoot. I think that's reasonable, despite the conceit of the show. These challenges were a lot, and I kinda like that these people got to take a night between each ordeal to catch their breath and recover. So now that you have a general idea of how the show worked, let's look more closely so you can get a real feel for how this played out. Be warned, there are many spoilers ahead, so if you'd rather go watch the show first, go do that. Then come back here so we can talk about it. We open on scary horror vibes as the contestants arrive, complete with nighttime and a creepy gate and even smoke on the ground. The host, Steve Valentine, is also the narrator, and he's there for the entire show, like an omniscient presence looking down on the contestants.
It always starts the same way, doesn't it, Rupert? Smiling faces.
Dude, this is episode 2. What do you mean it always starts the same way? The players walk in through the gate, and the show usually shares a few of their thoughts as they approach the house, either through voiceover or a cut to a confessional scene. They talk about what they're afraid of, what they want the money for, stuff like that. Special shout out to this lady who dresses like Annie Oakley and calls herself a cowgirl. We never learn any specifics about her, but she sticks with that bit the whole time, and I respect it. Everyone goes into the house and looks awkward and uncomfortable for a bit, and then the host, Steve, enters. He's smooth, composed, and comes across like he's barely hiding his disgust for these people. In other words, perfect. I could see how this might be off-putting to viewers who are used to shows where the hosts are encouraging, or at least not actively hoping that the contestants will fail, but I like this. It reminds me of the butlers on the Haunted Mansion ride at Disney World. Steve welcomes everyone to the house and explains how the game works. He smirks his way through his vague descriptions of how the house will not want to give up the money hidden in it. The contestants look nervous, and then Steve walks them to the first room and locks them in. We never see an actual layout of the house because, again, some of these challenges are filmed elsewhere. But we always get these spooky hallways with lots of dark wood. Unless it's a challenge outside, in which case we get vaguely fancy landscaping and poorly lit grounds. Anyway, the contestants are into the first round now. The rooms are all themed, like the kitchen or the trophy room or Steve's childhood bedroom. These aren't actually those rooms, of course, but everyone suspends belief so we can get to the good stuff. The 7 people start grabbing for money, which is tucked away everywhere. It might be at the bottom of a tank of spiders, it might be stuffed into a picture frame, it might be inside a rotting turkey carcass, it might be inside a statue. They make the usual sounds of fear and disgust while they search. Some of them scream, and some of them don't really stop screaming the entire time. Meanwhile, the room itself punishes them in some sort of way. It might start to collapse on them, it might fill with water, it might have non-venomous snakes crawling around, it might be strung with live wires that shock the players, or it might have a floor of non-Newtonian fluid that traps them when they try to walk. They have to push through whatever it is and get as much money as they can. I thought it was kind of funny that for the rooms that use electricity as punishment, the show puts a disclaimer on the screen warning people not to try this at home, but they don't actually show the disclaimer until well into the room itself's airtime. I guess they didn't want to spoil it, but what's more important, not spoiling your torture show or making sure viewers don't actually electrocute themselves?
There's one other thing. Get ready for the shock of your life.
Anyway, back to the trial room. Eventually, somebody decides they have enough money, or they're just tired of the room and they go to leave. In some cases, the doors are unlocked and they can escape, but in others, the doors don't open right away. Also, there are always multiple exits from the room that unlock at different times, and the rooms are laid out in odd shapes, so it's harder for the contestants to just look around and see who's left in the space.
I'm taking things apart, looking under things. I was so exhausted, the water had gotten to me because it was so cold. It was a tough decision whether to stay or to go because I don't know how much money anybody else had. I think I got enough. I've at least beat the person with the least amount.
You always get 1 or 2 contestants who are so focused on the money that they don't really notice the other people leaving, and when it's down to the last 2 people, 1 or both of them will be like, oh crap, where is everyone? I should go. 1 person gets out, 1 person gets stuck in the room, and the 6 who escaped all group up in the main area of the house again, where Steve is lounging and waiting for them. They all put their money on a tray held by Rupert the butler, and then the money is counted off screen so we can cut right to who had the most and who didn't. Meanwhile, Steve takes little digs at the contestants, which is something he does pretty much anytime he's forced to interact with them. Again, I like this. It's not like we, the audience, aren't already judging these people harshly in our own heads. Steve is just saying our thoughts out loud. Once the money is counted, Steve usually calls the 2 with the lowest money count forward. He announces who has the least, and that person is escorted from the room by Rupert. You usually get a shot of them holding onto Rupert's arm as he leads them down a hallway towards a door. 5 contestants to go. From here, sometimes the game changes a bit. In some episodes, Steve tells them there's a special item in the next room that's worth $1,000 if they find it. In other episodes, he says that whoever finds the most money in the next room will have an advantage in the room after that. The 5 people left go to the next themed room. They scramble to find money and deal with whatever unpleasantness there is, rinse and repeat. Someone gets stuck in room 2 and is eliminated. Someone brings out the smallest amount of money from room 2 and is also eliminated. And now we have 3 people left for room 3. At this point, we've whittled the diverse cast down to a trio of young, fit people, usually guys. Despite the show's obviously making an effort to cast a variety of ages and body types and skill levels for each episode, shows like this tend to end up with the healthy 20-somethings left standing. In fact, for every episode of A State of Panic, the contestant who goes into the final vault appears to be an under 40 man in good physical shape. The first one is actually named Chad. I didn't know real people were named Chad. Anyway, room 3's model is the same as the others, with some tweaks to adjust to the fact that there are just 3 contestants left now. In one case, the 3 of them crawl through narrow sewer pipes, so they can't really see each other or know where the others are, which seems to work well. 2 people get out, 1 is eliminated for having the least money, and the final contestant is taken to the vault. The vault is a little underwhelming. It's behind a bookcase, which is cool, but it's right there in the big lobby-type room, and it's small and it just looks like a regular bank vault. It has 200 safety deposit slots in it with little doors on them. Steve leads the finalist into the vault and tells him he can have all the cash he can grab in there as long as he gets out before the timer runs out. The timer, is a marble run of steel balls, and when the 10th ball reaches the bottom, the door locks. Of course, Steve points out that it's not going to be that easy, and he reveals that the finalist is going to be restrained in some way. He might be chained to the floor. He might be tied to a chair. He might be suspended from the ceiling. But whatever it is, he'll need to find the key or code or tool that will free him before he can escape the room. Of course, the restraint still allows the guy to reach the various slots in the walls, but those slots are varying degrees of helpful. Most of them seem to be full of junk, like rice or sand or random knickknacks. Some have spiders or snakes. But really, it doesn't look like there's as much money in there as you might expect to find in a vault. Not that it matters, because most of the time these guys are in the vault is spent trying to get themselves free. Again, it's helpful that these are healthy, fit people, because I really can't imagine some of the earlier contestants trying to pry their shackles off the floor with a crowbar. Most of the guys get free and are able to grab a few more handfuls of money and get out of the vault with like seconds to spare. In fact, no one ever gets trapped in the vault, which is nice. 5 of the 6 get out clean, and the one who doesn't, David in episode 3, uses the I'm panicking escape option and is able to leave with half the money. In fairness, I thought David's restraints were a bit too much for the time allowed. He had both hands and a leg shackled, which was a lot to try to get out of for anyone who isn't, a magician. Looking at you, Steve. The winner stands with Steve outside the vault, and Steve hands them a leather bag with whatever money was found throughout the course of the episode. It always ends up being around $30,000. Steve looks visibly annoyed, takes another pot shot at how much money the winner missed inside the vault, and then tells them,
Get out of my house.
That's pretty much it. The credits roll as the winner runs outside and bounces down the mansion's front steps with the bag in hand. He gets into a waiting car, the car drives off, and the episode is over. So now that you have the full experience of A State of Panic, let's talk about some of the things that probably led to its failure. First, let's not forget just how many reality competition shows were popping up around this time. I can't overstate this, it was a lot. And A State of Panic was on cable, not the mainstream networks. So if you were just watching NBC and CBS at the time, like a lot of regular TV viewers, especially older people, you would not have seen this show. A State of Panic was fighting an uphill battle for visibility. How do you stand out in a sea of other reality competition shows, each with their own gimmicks, on a channel that had only just switched to a 16:9 broadcast ratio in preparation for HD? I couldn't find specific viewership numbers for A State of Panic, but the most popular shows on Sci-Fi in late 2008 were pulling between 2 million and 3 million viewers, and this wasn't remotely one of their most popular shows. By comparison, the premiere of American Idol Season 8, which aired on mainstream channel Fox 1 month after A State of Panic ended, pulled 30 million viewers. Not that anyone expected American Idol viewership levels for this little horror-themed reality show, but there's still an expectation of performance relative to the network it's on, especially after the success of Scare Tactics. But I think the main thing that really held A State of Panic back was the lack of actual stakes. Brian Lowry wrote for Variety in November 2008, "Look, let's be honest about this. Unless a network decides that it's willing to kill contestants, the idea of a haunted house competition show lacks a certain sense of peril and suspense." And yeah, he has a point. You can make a show as spooky as you like. You can imply the contestants are left to die in rooms full of water. But viewers know that no one is actually being seriously hurt or killed. In fact, the very first time we hear a contestant speak on this show, it's this.
I know I'm not gonna die, at least I hope I'm not.
I mean, of course the players know they're not in any real danger, but it's weird that they start by admitting that right out of the gate. Maybe they were concerned that some viewers thought actual harm was coming to these people. I'm not sure how they could think that, though. The show makes it very clear that everyone survives by cutting confessional scenes into the show throughout the episodes. Exhausted contestants, sometimes dripping wet or covered in filth, sit in a small room and talk about how awful the experience was or how they screwed up. The minute you let the losers appear on camera to talk about what they did, you dispel even the slightest hint that anyone was actually hurt by the show. Which again, that's good, we don't want people getting hurt, but since the entire show is designed around this, ooh, spooky, some people aren't getting out alive vibe, any suggestion that there are real stakes is immediately removed. Yes, the viewers know it's fake on some level, but in a show with this level of showmanship and commitment to the bit, you probably don't want to keep reminding your viewers how fake it is. Another issue with A State of Panic was that it was what writer Andy Denart calls diet fear factor. Remember that both shows were produced by the same company, but Fear Factor was on mainstream TV and had much larger scale stunts. A State of Panic couldn't match that level of performance, so it leaned into the creepy horror kitsch instead, which Denart attributes to its need to fit in on the Sci-Fi Channel and also distance itself from Fear Factor a bit. He thought the storyline about finding money in the house was cheesy and pointless, but then he drove home the main appeal of shows like this. He said that once the group of contestants thinned out each episode, the show sucked me in, not because I cared about the people, but because I was enjoying watching them be electrocuted or crushed or whatever was happening in that particular room. Like I said before, audiences really do like to watch people suffer on reality shows. I'm sure there are whole theses written about the psychology of that. Probably something about a moral high ground that makes the audience feel superior while they watch people debase themselves on TV for money. But that's not a can of worms I'm going to open in this video. But yeah, there were plenty of shows on TV around this time that tortured people for money, entertainment, or both. Even commercials tried to get in on this edgy culture. Some properties really pushed the envelope. 2 years before A State of Panic aired, Universal Studios ran a Halloween Horror Nights promo that featured a character called The Director, who was making a snuff film with some unwilling participants. The ad was legit disturbing to a lot of people, myself included, and got a lot of criticism for being too real, too bleak, an unpleasant departure from the scary but fun style of previous years. To me, that ad and those like it represented basically the limit the average audiences would be able to handle for mainstream TV horror. Like, it's one thing if you choose to watch a horror movie, but if you're sitting at home watching Wheel of Fortune with your grandson and this commercial comes on, you didn't sign up for that, you know? The State of Panic obviously couldn't go that far for a lot of reasons, so they stuck to the safer formula that reduced the stakes and made contestants more uncomfortable than genuinely terrified, which forced it to lean heavily on the aesthetics, the host, the sets, the music, which did a huge amount of heavy lifting for the show. It did the best it could to fill in the gaps with that goth styling that was really peaking around this time, but it never felt truly dangerous or scary. And in a sea of similar shows all jostling for the same market share, it just wasn't quite enough to stand out. Remember, I don't like reality shows. I've never watched anything with a Kardashian or an Osbourne. I've never seen The Bachelor or Love is Blind or Love Island, and I give zero fucks what housewives are doing in what cities. I also loathe shows that exist to prey on those in need by making people endure genuine misery just to win a few bucks. Looking at you, Mr. Beast, you dead-eyed sadist. So yeah, I really shouldn't have been at all interested in A State of Panic. I've spent a lot of time thinking about what it was about that show that grabbed me. It wasn't the contestants suffering. I always recoiled a bit from that. I'm not someone who likes watching people wince in pain or scream in terror. It wasn't the campy conceit that this was Steve's house and the rooms were really what he said they were. The trial rooms were clearly set pieces, and while the house was pretty, no one with half a brain would watch the show and think the place actually worked like that. It wasn't the contestants, who by and large weren't very interesting in and of themselves. The show didn't have the time to get to know any of them very well, so most of the viewer impressions of the contestants came from how they acted in the trial rooms, whether they tried to be sneaky or screw each other over, who lied, who tricked someone else into getting trapped somewhere, that sort of thing. Which usually leads to a situation where you're not cheering for one person to win, you're cheering for the people you hate to lose. Most of us have a sense of fairness that reacts to seeing one person sabotage another, and we want the saboteur to suffer. It's a small but important distinction. Pulling for a hero and wishing for the downfall of a villain leave a very different taste in your mouth. No, I think what worked for me with A State of Panic was more than the sum of its parts. It felt like it was making more of an effort than a lot of the other reality competition shows, at least to create that aesthetic of a proper, spooky, possibly haunted house. The host was perfect in his complete lack of a need to pander to the players. The action moved fairly quickly, which I liked, but also didn't seem to linger on the suffering of the contestants. The suffering wasn't the end game, resilience was, and the show highlighted how the players played the game, played each other, and pushed through the obstacles that stood between them and the money. Sure, there was a lot of content designed to be gross or off-putting, but as the show went on, it seemed like it lingered less on that stuff and more on what contestants were doing about it. And I also liked the design of the game, the whole don't be the last one out, but also don't find the least money. There was a fun psychology to that. Maybe that mechanic appeared in other shows at the time. But again, I didn't watch other shows. I watched this one. The State of Panic is long gone now, tossed into the heap of dead reality shows and mostly forgotten. Except by me. I think you can still find it on Amazon Prime, and I know a few episodes are on YouTube as well, at least for now. So if you want to check it out, give it a watch. It's a dumb cheese reality competition show, but it tried to have some fun with its concept, and I can't help but give it at least decent marks. And with that, get out of my house. I'm dressed like this for a reason, I promise.